create videos. I have a conference that I'm doing with the University of South Queensland, and that's a video presentation that will be delivered to them on the 29th. I was working on trying to actually create that video while I was here. I have my video camera here, and I went walking around. Of course, the high winds, the fires, the smoke, and all of that has sort of descended on us like the plague here in California has made recording video kind of difficult, especially outside. But
is a man in a room, empty place. There's a wall, a table, and a chair. His face, he wants to write something down. He wants to sing a song or paint something. Lie down or fade away. Get up and get away to the beat of marching feet in the heat of the prison heat. There's the sun through the bars, cutting slow, lighting dust. I love dust. Let it stay, let it fall. He wants to write something down. He wants to sing a song or paint something. Lie down or fade away. Get up and get away to the beat of marching feet in the heat of prison heat. And there's this choir, sometimes near in my head. Perfect notes, it delights all the rest. What a face! But I'll write something down. He wants to sing a song or paint something. Lie down and fade away, or get up and get away to the beat of marching feet in the heat of prison heat. 7 steps to the wall, turn around. 7 steps to the window, turn around. 3 steps to the table, step around. Move the chair to the square and then sit down. Don't turn around.
learning communities and educational settings. What should be the role of learning communities and educational settings? What is the role of ICT in this? Does it imply that we need to modify the way we develop and design education? Or is it more about complete change? What is the role of the teacher, educator in these settings, where we modify what we do, if that's what you think, where complete change is the go? You can take your own spin on this. Whatever aspect of this you'd like to comment on. What's your views on learning communities and ICT? Where is it all going? Where should it be going? I don't know. That's what I'll explore through the day as I record this video, and you'll explore with me, I guess. So I guess I better get packed up and out there. actual act of making a video for a presentation is a bit more involved than preparing a talk with doing a talk and doing slides. At least that's my expectation of myself. I think that people expect something a lot more produced when they're looking at video. I think that's my expectation anyways, and it's a question perhaps that some of you can answer for me. My feeling is that if I'm doing a video presentation for them, that maybe I can get away with a head and shoulders presentation now, but for how long will I? Okay, I'm still getting the hang of this a bit, trying to determine when I'm recording and when I'm not. This is actually the third time I've tried this take. It's kind of interesting, you know, when people get a video instead of a talk, an online talk or a talk in person. They have certain expectations that videos have. You know, that they'll get high production values, that they'll get the nice smooth camera work, polished scripts. They won't get the experience of a person just speaking off the top of their head, because that's not what they want when they do a live video or a recorded video like this, for example. See, the thing is too, if I try editing it, if I try, you know, cutting out the bad bits, cutting out the bits where I didn't get the exact line that I wanted, yeah, you'll get a nice polished presentation, but you won't get the experience of the live presentation, and it's the live presentation that I'm trying to capture here. That's why I'm recording this in a Starbucks in the hotel lobby, because I want to get across the feel of what happens as we work through these topics in our mind. They talked about the role of community in an educational setting. Well, I'm surrounded by community. We're all surrounded by community. What does that mean, the role of community in an educational setting? You know, it's sort of tempting to want to begin by defining community to begin with. What is community? Is community a bunch of people all grouped together according to their common interests and common goals? Or is community just proximity? Is it just what you happen to find on the street? Well, I've written about Well, I've written about this before. I've talked about the distinction between groups and networks. These are different ways of organizing people, and perhaps one of the biggest sources of conflict we've had in history is how do we go about organizing people. Oh yeah, and what if they don't want to be organized? You know, people sometimes talk about intentional communities. Communities deliberately put together by people who want to associate some sort of common purpose. But I think we need to talk more about accidental community that just exists out of proximity. I think communities sometimes exist not because people want to be in communities, simply because they're in communities, just where they happen to be. But you know, there's community, and then there's community, this sense of belonging, this sense of responsibility to the whole. Community thought of sort of as some sort of sense of defined set of interactions. You know, I think community is one of those words we really equivocate about. You know, sometimes it's community, and sometimes it's a mob, and sometimes we don't know what it is. It's whatever happens to be convenient for us. Yeah, you know, I think we've always gotten away with an equivocation on the word community. When I think of community, I think of something that is trying to get me to do something is trying to get me to follow rules. Maybe that's just me, but you know, community isn't always this benign thing. Community is this thing that other people use in order to convince me that they're right. You should do this. The community is doing this. The community expects you to do such and such. But you know, how often is the community right? And how often does the community act to serve somebody else's interests at the expense of my interests? Or at the expense of your interests? You know, I've always thought that the great fiction that defines our community is the social contract theory, advanced by people like Hobbes and by Locke, and more recently by Rawls, as though there's some sort of sense in which we could all agree to form a community by such and such rules. But it's a fiction, isn't it? Because when did we agree? Yeah, we have these rules. Whose rules? Who makes the rules? You know, and that's what has always gotten me about these people who talk about classes as community, online courses as community, as though the people in these courses are somehow citizens, as though they somehow have rights. But we know that's not the case, right? Right to the next slide. I couldn't have planned that one better. But I get that, you know, and I'll bet you, you know, you guys are in educational technology, I'll bet you get that too. There's this idea of reality as being something even that defines what it is to be sane, right? only a sane person would do such and such, or no sane person would try to wire the university campus. No sane person would think you could teach courses online because you have to have real interaction. And this whole idea of reality intervenes. I did a talk once, and it was in Australia, and they were going online learning from virtual to reality. And the idea of that talk was, of course, that this pipe dream that was online learning was going to become reality. But of course, everybody thinks online learning, that's not real learning. It's not really fake learning. It's certainly not physical learning. It's kind of like virtual learning. And the point of the talk was that the online learning actually makes the learning more real over time. It makes it more real because it gets us out of this non-real classroom. This artifice, this artificial thing that we create where we go and teach people in very structured, artificial ways. Online learning is able to take us out of that artifice, out of that invention, out of that fiction, and put learning into the community. And that has always struck me as being the thing about online learning, the real power behind online learning. I don't know if you can hear the background noise here, but I'm at the entrance to Disneyland now. And it's interesting how they create the atmosphere with the music in the background. I think that things like music and sound and words go a long way to define what a community is. That's why it's so important, isn't it? Whoever owns the words and the music owns the community, right? Or is it whoever owns the land? Or whoever owns the people? Rawls said the community is designed or defined by an original community, an original gathering people, an original state where people would agree on what the conditions would be for the community, what the conditions would be, what the terms would be, how wealth would be distributed, how income would be distributed. It's a lot simpler in practice, or in theory I should say, than in practice. In practice, well, you really don't know where you're going. See, the thing is with Rawls' original condition is you never knew whether you're going to be rich or you're going to be poor or what you're going to be. But in the real world, we already know what we are. We know what we are, and we know what we aspire to be. And somewhere in there lie the parameters that we actually define a community by. And it turns out when we actually know what we're going to be, what we are, the community we build is very different from the community that we build when we don't know what we're going to be. And that's perhaps why the community we build in the classroom is very different from the community we build in society as a whole, because what we are is different. In the classroom, we're a student or we're a teacher. We have certain roles, certain powers already, certain original conditions that don't hold in just the theoretical point of view. The theoretical point of view, well, we're just wandering around aimlessly in these chains. look at these Web 2.0 applications, look at the way a lot of this stuff is rolling out on the internet, that you can see underlying principles. I call this the semantic principle, and in one sense it's descriptive in the sense that this is what's happening, but in the other sense it's prescriptive in the sense of, if we want this kind of system to work, these are the properties these applications are going to have. And the properties are very simply, first of all, they need to support individual autonomy. People need to have the capacity to make their own decisions, to manage their own data, to make their own creations, things like that. Secondly, they need to support diversity. Rather than forcing everybody into the same thing, they need to allow people to make their own choices. And what's important is they need to allow people who have made different choices to be able to interact. Third, openness. The network needs to be open. That means that people need to be able to contribute to the network, and it also means that people need to be able to access data and information from the network. And then finally, connectivity or interactiveness. There needs to be ways for people who are in the network to communicate back and forth with each other, and so that there aren't barriers or blocks from one person communicating with another person. You see more about these in the slides, so I go on about these quite a bit more in the slides, and I've talked about these 4 principles and others in my talk, so if you're interested, you'll be able to find more on my website. So
I have a personal question with regard to that last comment, and then I'll pass the mic around.
Sure.
But for me, those elements that you just spoke of beg the question, is there enough bandwidth to do this? And what is the role of an institution that traditionally has done a lot of these developmental pieces that now can be downloaded from the web? And then what is the role of the institution in acquiring bandwidth and controlling that even further? I think it does allow for a freedom, but at the same time we're constrained by what's available, what the institution will make available, and the priorities it will place in certain elements of availability. So that's just a general comment. I don't know if you want to respond. I will pass the mic.
Yeah, bandwidth is one of these. I think there's going to be enough bandwidth, and the questions will largely be who pays for it, because there's going to be a demand for bandwidth. It's not like bandwidth is always going to be expensive. I mean, fiber optics can move huge amounts of bandwidth. We work in NRC with CANet 4, which is fiber at bandwidths that are not even imaginable. So I think the bandwidths will be there. The role of the institution is much more interesting, because as we shift from a more group-centered to a more network-centered environment, the things that institutions do, I'm trying to say this quickly and I can't. The sorts of things that institutions do will become less valued, and indeed will become more problematic. But one of the things institutions do really well is standardize. But in a world where diversity rather than sameness is a value, the push to standardization becomes a hindrance rather than a support. And that's just an example. Institutions are going to be facing these kind of fights. Institutions are structured typically hierarchically, not as networks. They're structured with processes of management and control in an environment where more and more it's going to be important to allow people to work without manage and without being controlled. And again, so these things are going to clash. So,
thanks.
Yeah, I can't say. course, it was a common critique of Rawls that he would, of course, come up with a theory of liberal democracy, of justice as fairness, but that theory reflected more the society he found himself in than what the ideal conditions were for community. And I suppose it's not surprising in the same vein that when people talk about community in the classroom, they create the existing classrooms. They create the conditions under which students already study and teachers already teach, with testing and group activities and the whole works. You know, I think we pack an awful lot into what our norms are when we use the word community. We pack a lot of our norms into the concept of community. And I think it's worth asking what these are, what these presumptions are. How do we define? It's not even the right word. I don't even want to say define, but how do we understand what counts as normal?